Hello and welcome to Wisconsin in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent, Benjamin Yount. Ben, before we get into the news today, I just wanted to ask you, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who eliminated your Milwaukee Brewers in the wild card round, they're now in the World Series after also eliminating the Philadelphia Phillies and the Los Angeles Dodgers, two of the favorites to represent the National League in the World Series. So here's my question. You feel any better about the Brewers' loss to the Diamondbacks after they also steamrolled through some of the best teams in the league?
The Diamondbacks need to thank us. And on behalf of Brewer Nation, I will say you're welcome, because the Diamondbacks are now the 9th team in a row to beat the Brewers in the postseason and go to or win the World Series. That if you beat Milwaukee in the playoffs, you go to the World Series. That's the deal. I don't know what we did, how we offended the baseball gods. Maybe we need to get a billy goat or a chicken or some sort of, Miller product and sacrifice it in the parking lot. But this is an honest to God, ridiculous fact. If you beat the Brewers in the Major League Baseball playoffs, you go on to be in the World Series or win the World Series. So on behalf of Brewer Nation, you're welcome, Arizona. You got to the World Series simply by playing us.
Well, thank you for that, Ben. That's a not so fun fact that I did not know and had not heard before. I learned something today.
That's what we do here. We're givers here on Wisconsin in Focus.
And I'm sure non-Brewer fans, particularly Diamondbacks fans, appreciate it. Well, why don't we just stick with the Brewers then, Ben? First, let me say we are recording this on Thursday, October 26th. As we've talked about quite a bit in recent weeks, the city of Milwaukee, the county, and the state have been discussing options to pay for renovations to American Family Field to ensure that the Brewers stay in Milwaukee. The current plan includes spending about $500 million in taxpayer money on the renovations, but the plan ran into some resistance in the state Senate this week. Bring us up to speed, Ben.
The interesting part here is that this is Republican opposition. That for the most part in the Assembly, Republicans were on board. You had a handful, one or two, who don't like the idea of spending taxpayer dollars on a stadium that is for a billion-dollar ball club. And there is a absolute time and place for that conversation. Unfortunately, here in Wisconsin, that time and place was in 1996 when the former Governor Tommy Thompson agreed to have the state be the landlord for this. And as supporters of this deal will point out, that, look, taxpayers are on the hook for this, whether the Brewers play there or not. Whether it is the home to a Major League Baseball team or the fanciest high school baseball state championship park in America, this is something that the taxpayers are going to be stuck paying for. Might as well, they say, pay for it, keep the Brewers, lock them down through 2050, and then we get to have this whole conversation all over again when it comes time to build a brand new ballpark. But this is opposition this week from Republicans in the Wisconsin Senate, and it comes down to two general broad categories. They don't want to spend as much, or they don't want to rush this through. And that's where we saw the piece that we filed, I believe it was Wednesday, over at the Center Square. The questions come from. There were a lot of questions as to why do we have to do this now? And the head of the Senate Republicans, Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, said that they don't quite have the 17 votes. So they're not there. He thinks they can get there. He wants to keep the Brewers in town, but he said he wants to see a lot fewer dollars from taxpayers and some more dollars from the Brewers. There's also a big conversation about a ticket tax and the beer district, both of which the Brewers are willing to work with. They can talk about the generalities, but at this point, the Brewers aren't on board with charging fans a lot more to go see games. So this is not a stalemate, but this is an expected road bump that may be a little bit bigger than was expected.
Now, is there any sort of deadline anybody's facing here when it comes to getting a plan approved by all the bodies that need to approve it? Or is, as some of the Republicans have said, why are we rushing this through?
It is the big deadline that the folks who aren't in a rush to spend money on the ballpark point out is that the Brewers are locked down with a lease through 2037. So they say, well, we've got more than a decade. We don't need to rush and hurry. The problem is the entity that owns the stadium, the Southeast Wisconsin Professional Baseball Park District, because they couldn't make the name longer, apparently, is running out of money. This was, again, a government entity that was supported by a 5-county sales tax, and that tax expired back in 2021. We wrote stories at the time cheering this because, again, tax reform in Wisconsin, people are paying less. The problem is this park district has no other source of funding. They get an infinitesimal amount of money for everybody who buys the Brewer vanity license plates, but they don't have enough money to keep up with the day-to-day maintenance. And so no one's really sure just when the park district runs out of money. It could be this year, it could be next year, but it's going to be soon. And so that's the deadline that is going unspoken. It's not the end of the lease. It's not the time that it would take for the Brewers to find a new home. It is the fact that at a certain point, the landlord at American Family Field isn't going to have enough money. And anybody who's ever rented an apartment or anyone who's ever been a landlord themselves knows that's not a good situation. Hey, if the bathrooms on the third floor break, well, the Brewers aren't paying for that, and you're not going to fix that by collecting a quarter a stall from fans. You're going to have to use that money from the park district. And so that's really the urgency. Plus, this is just an old state house adage. When you have the votes, you call the bill. Waiting around doesn't help you at a state capitol. They have the votes in the assembly. They've got the city of Milwaukee. They've got Milwaukee County, and they've got Governor Evers on board. Plus, the Brewers are more than welcome or more than willing at this point to accommodate to a certain point. And so everyone here is lined up except for a handful of Republican senators. And that's the urgency, that when you have the votes, you call the bill, and they almost have the votes. And so they're trying to get to the point where they can call the bill as quickly as they can.
So almost out of time, Ben, but just for your final question, it is the end of October. Happy Halloween, by the way. Halloween is next week, just when the temperatures are going to get to freezing. Ice and maybe also rain. So good luck to the trick-or-treaters out there. But it is almost the end of 2023. This will probably push into 2024's legislative session, I would guess.
We have some more floor session next month in November. I think that the desire all around is to get this locked down before the end of the year. I've talked to Rick Schlesinger, who's with the Brewers, and you get the sense that this is one of these things they want to have wrapped up before they come back next spring. There is a huge desire to have, the talk of the Brewers be about baseball and the baseball season and, getting down to business. These questions of, are you going to leave? Are you going to stay? That doesn't do anyone any good. And again, the vote calculus does not get better after the first of the year. There's no constitutional requirement to do it now, but, Devin LeMahieu said they don't have the 17 votes yet. He didn't say how close they'll get to that 17. But that's all they need, is just a handful of votes. And when they get them, I expect them to call this, because you never know. This is a legislature that has been, the polite way to say it is, at odds with this governor and at odds with the leaders in Milwaukee and Milwaukee County for years. They have one small area where they agree, and I don't think they want to get too far away from that. Get the agreement now, get it done before people get their feelings hurt in an election year next year.
Well, thank you, as always, for your insight into this issue, Ben. I encourage our listeners to continue to follow your reporting on this topic and others at thecentersquare.com. But we are out of time. For Ben Yount, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.